Hey kiddies, it's Triple Feature Tuesday once again, and this week we're looking at Clive Barker directing Clive Barker. You get so many popular horror writers, and their books are often adapted into movies. I mean, the number of Stephen King movies is quite remarkable, and we've gotten to the point where there are even remakes of established Stephen King movies now. You don't get as often the writers that want to direct their own pictures. Stephen King, for all the movies that have been made from his stuff, there's only been one that he actually directed, Maximum Overdrive, which, if you've seen it, well, you can see all the cocaine that he was doing at the time on the screen. It's really just... Whew. Clive Barker, the Liverpudlian horror writer, has always been much more of a multimedia artist. He's always painted, he's always written for different media, and so it's not surprising that he wanted to try his hand at directing. An added bonus is that he's pretty good at it, and it's sort of unfortunate that he's only ever made 3 movies. There have been several movies made based on his stories he's written, but he's only directed 3 movies over the course of 8 years, from 1987 to 1995. Mainly this is because of the movie he made in the middle. But, you know, he did sort of redeem himself with the 3rd movie, I would argue. Our menu is going to include Hellraiser, Nightbreed, and Lord of Illusions. All of these are based on Clive Barker's short stories. Like, the longest one, Nightbreed, is based on Cabal, which is a novella. It's still not like a full-length novel. Same with The Hellbound Heart, which is the basis for Hellraiser, and Lord of Illusions is based on The Last Illusion, which I think is only like 40 pages. Just about all of the major movies that have been made based on Clive Barker works are all short stories, and the most of them coming from his great anthology, The Books of Blood. He came to direct Hellraiser because of Rawhead Rex. Rawhead Rex is one of the Books of Blood, and the movie they made from it really has almost no relation to the book at all. It's it's not, no, the plot structure and everything is there, but the creature is less than impressive, the acting is subpar, and it was so bad that Clive just said, nope, 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 nope. From now on, I am directing them. And so, almost Julie Garland-esque, he got a little bit of money together, made some costumes, redecorated the barn in England to look like sort of Brooklyn, and made Hellraiser. And oh boy, this movie, if it weren't so entertaining, you would just be left with the fact that it is a complete and total mess, and sort of almost doesn't have a complete story in it. You sort of need the second movie to kind of complete the story set up in this one, but that's a different triple feature. We're just talking about the first one. Like, the narrative structures are troublesome because it plays so much like the novella. You're never really sure who exactly the main character should be, because honestly, the main character of this film is Julia, Larry Cotton's cheating wife. Julia is bored with being married to Larry, and the reason she's bored with being married to Larry is because she met brother Frank, and oh boy, Frank is the worst. We are talking just a complete and total scumbag who uses everybody and everything for his own pursuit of pleasure, which led him to finding the box. The lament configuration made by the toy maker Le Marchand, which opens a doorway to what we're going to call hell. Might not actually be Judeo-Christian hell, but it's a place full of sadomasochists from beyond the grave, which, by the by, was the working title for this movie. Frank becomes trapped in this hell after he opens the box, and it's through a series of, typical horror movie moments that Frank is being brought back to life through blood spilled in the house that Julia and Larry have moved into. And it is the sequence where Frank starts coming back to life. He just kind of grows out of the floor. It's really something, and it was actually added to the film after the first cut was done. The producers of the film liked the movie so far so much that they added like an extra $10,000 or $20,000 to do the whole sequence, and man, it is worth it because it is just a showstopper. And then you have all this makeup with Frank being like all just, not completely human, but like growing back into it, which he's doing by Julia tricking men into coming back to her place so Frank can drink them dry. It's really gross. But it's also really fascinating to watch Claire Higgins as Julia, because she goes from, kind of a put-upon, annoyed wife that is just, she can tell she's just bored with Larry and thinks she, made a mistake, to really getting into murdering people for Frank. And, it's part of it is the promise of having Frank back, but you can tell she sort of just starts enjoying it more, which makes it fascinating. The problem story structure wise is that's the first half of the movie. The second half of the movie is pretty much all about Kirsty Cotton, Larry's daughter, Frank's niece, who stumbles upon Julia and Frank in the act of murdering people. Frank didn't have enough skin to do other stuff yet. Attacking them both and stealing the box, and then she opens the box and oh my god, now she's on the hook, figuratively and literally, with the Cenobites, led by Doug Bradley, playing horror icon who would later be known as Pinhead. Originally, the Cenobites did not have character names. They were lead Cenobite, fat Cenobite, chattering Cenobite, and then the oh-so-creative name, female Cenobite, because she's just the girl. But on the set, the crew all had nicknames for them, and so it became Butterball, Chatterer, Pinhead, and those names all got adopted by, the credits later in the later films. The only one, except for, she's still known as female Cenobite because her nickname was Deep Throat. She's got a hole in her throat. And then it becomes cat and mouse, Kirsty trying to bargain her way out of going back to hell with the Cenobites, and also trying to escape Frank and Julia and everything, and there's monsters everywhere, and wow, the movie's just strange. It's weird enough, kind of, the tone of the movie is strange looking because, there's several references to it being set in Brooklyn, but it's very clearly London throughout the whole thing. The subway station is a tube station. Every face is English, because the English people have a look. And everybody except for Kirsty and Larry are English people, either trying to do an American accent and, doing all right, or just not even. There are seemingly a lot of English people just hanging around Brooklyn. Or it's England. I don't know, I guess it was one of those make it more palatable for American audiences to have Americans in it, but, I don't know. It just makes it kind of feel and sound weird to begin with, and you get nothing but gore and grossness. And what's interesting about the first movie is that the Cenobites, the visually monstrous characters, are not the bad guys. They only come when you call them. And yes, they could be nicer about, leaving people alone who didn't know what they were doing, but hey, that's life. And the real villains are really Frank and Julia throughout the whole thing, and they become much more monstrous over the course of the film. And it's just, and it also introduced, bondage gear into modern horror movies with just the look, it's religious garments by way of the industrial rock scene in England, and it's just really striking throughout the whole film and the series. And what's fun is that while there were cuts for the gore, for the rating, most of the cuts revolve around sex scenes that Clive tried to make a bit more racy, but he was not allowed to do it. It became a hit between Stephen King endorsing the books that Clive had been writing, and then this movie, Clive Barker was, the toast of the horror town. And so it was no surprise when he made that movie for $2 million, and then Morgan Creek offered him $10 million to make another movie, and this would be Nightbreed. Clive would not rest on his laurels. He wanted to make if Hellraiser's a $2 million movie, he wanted to make the $10 million equivalent of it. And he described his intentions for Nightbreed to be the Star Wars of monster movies. Just monsters and monsters and monsters and action and pathos and oh my god. It didn't really turn out that way. Clive had a lot of trouble telling the story he wanted to tell. The movie went through a bunch of cuts before it originally premiered because people were having trouble understanding what was going on. The plot of the movie is Craig Schaefer plays Boone, who has unspecified psychological problems, which he's being treated for by a psychiatrist named Decker, played by David Cronenberg, as just a full-on bad guy. This is not a cameo. This is not like a little, oh, he's just playing this character for one scene. No, he is the full-on bad guy through the whole movie, and man, Dave can do anything. I mean, Dave plays a really creepy dude throughout this whole movie. Decker explains to Boone that in these sessions he has unconsciously confessed to all of these murders, and so Boone goes off to either kill himself or go to this fabled town Midian where all monsters are welcome, and because he considers himself a monster because he's murdering all these people. Turns out, no. Actually, Decker is killing all of these people and is trying to pin it on Boone, and he and the police end up cornering Boone around Midian, but not before Boone had already been there and got bitten by one of the creatures, and so when they all shoot him to death, he just comes back to life and is now one of the Nightbreed. Once Decker finds out about this, oh boy, it's like Christmas, because all he wants to do is kill people that he feels are just genetically beneath him, and man, just look at the Nightbreed. And let's look at the Nightbreed. Clive and company really just went nuts in terms of just designs, like just coming up with like a zillion different designs for these creatures. No two of them look the same, and all of them are interesting looking, and like they're all beautiful or ugly or beautifully ugly or ugly beautiful, and it's really, really something. Much like in Hellraiser, the monsters, the visually striking monsters, were not really the villains. The bad guys were really the humans that were condemning them. Is consistent for a writer who grew up in working class Liverpool and is gay. It actually, like, I forget what movie critic wrote about it, but he loved that Nightbreed was the first successful homosexual romance horror movie because the relationship between Decker and Boone is complicated. After making all the cuts that Morgan Creek could want, he gave them the movie, but then they made more cuts and repackaged it and tried to make it look more like a Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th, which this movie really isn't that. And the movie tanked. The movie did horribly. It did not. I don't think it made its money back. It became something of a cult classic, and there was also all these rumors about like there was like an hour's worth of footage that was cut out of the movie. And for years and years and years, you would just hear about, oh yeah, there was all this stuff that made the movie better and all this, that, and the other thing. But then people started finding the footage and cutting it back together for these great horror convention circuits. And then it got so popular that they actually unearthed a good print of all this extra footage and put it together into a DVD that you could get and watch. And man, this new cut's brilliant. All sorts of just extra stuff with Decker. The movie just has a better pace. It's not, because like the whole third act in the original cut just goes right off the rails. It goes from like Boone getting framed for yet another murder by Decker, and then all of a sudden it's World War III with, the fate of humanity on the line, murdering all these deformed people. Whereas this one, all the characters are given a lot more room to spread out and grow and actually tell a good story. And it's left a bit, the ending is much more true to the novella and more open for sequels, which Clive originally had envisioned this as the beginning of a trilogy, which, man, God, where would that even have ended? Because it's not like all the stuff from the novella is covered in this movie, so nobody knows what that would have even looked like. Why hasn't he written that? He could have written those stories by now. That would have been awesome. Like, he gave Hellraiser an ending with the recent Scarlet Gospels, but damn it! So because that movie tanked, it was 5 years before anybody would let him go near the director's chair again, and this time it was oddly a much more conventionally unconventional film, Lord of Illusions, which Clive does not like the theatrical cut, which I've never actually seen. I did not see it in the theater, but he prefers the cut on video and DVD, so if you've only seen it from renting it, then this is exactly what Clive wants you to look at. This is a perfect hybrid horror movie / film noir. It has all the tropes of both. It's incredible. Scott Bakula plays Clive Barker's recurring detective character, Harry D'Amour, who is a reluctant paranormal detective, always being dragged into this stuff because he has a talent for it and not dying. He is out in LA on an insurance scam when it gets drawn into the lives of Philip and Dorothea Swan. Philip Swan is David Copperfield to the nth degree, because Philip Swan is actually a magician. He trained with the evil magician Nyx, and instead of just performing illusions, he is actually doing magic. But as it turns out, Nyx, who they killed at the beginning of the film, is coming back to life, and all of his followers are making all of their lives miserable, and Harry is stuck trying to sort the whole mess out and try to get everybody out of it alive. With varying degrees of success. It is a horror movie, but this movie looks great. Hellraiser looks like an art film. Nightbreed looks like it does look like a Star Wars-y type of movie. It looks like a big blockbuster epic with a million zillion monsters. Whereas there is a polish to Lord of Illusions that makes it gorgeous. And it really looks like a modern version of like a Humphrey Bogart movie where it's just all film noir, shadows, curtains everywhere, and just going around LA. Visually, it kind of reminds me a lot of Chinatown, because, in color, but still noir in LA. And Scott Bakula is incredible. Famke Janssen plays Dorothea. You got Kevin O'Connor as Philip Swan, and the always great Daniel von Bargen as Nyx, who is just everything about him is just creepy. He's got like this Manson-esque cult and the pedophilia, and there's a mandrill running around through, the first third of the movie. It's just really gross. And you got these inspired murders, because it's fun when you're making, hybrid film noir and horror movie. In film noir, there's always murders, but, since it's also part of a horror movie, we could have them be really ghastly murders. Like the first death of Philip Swan is really revolting, and then there's a later one, which is, a bit more special effectsy, but still quite revolting. And it's a shame that he's never really been given the chance to make another movie on his own terms again, because, say what you will about Nightbreed, and I would argue that it was more a failure of marketing and audiences not knowing what to expect with it. By the time he made Lord of Illusions, this is a very slick, good-looking movie that tells a coherent story from start to finish that is also very entertaining. Like, I would challenge you, show Lord of Illusions to people that aren't into horror that much, and they will find things to like in it, because it is still at its root a detective story with a very charming lead in Scott Bakula. I'm bummed that he's never really been able to make another movie on his own terms. There have been great Clive Barker movies since then, and of course before then, Candyman oddly enough is not directed by Clive Barker, but you would have thought it was, because it is a perfect adaptation of a Clive Barker novel. But you've got a lot of good stuff with like the Midnight Meat Train, Book of Blood, Dread was not bad. There have been good Hellraiser sequels after 2 every so often. But as it stands, Clive has only directed 3 movies, and since 3 movies is what we like on the Terrible Triple Feature, you should take time and watch Hellraiser, Nightbreed, the Cabal Cut, and Lord of Illusions. And hopefully see you next week as we continue more horror in Halloween.